Now, Nobel Prize winner, key Good Friday Agreement representative and former Stormont First Minister David Trimble, he died last night at the age of 77.
And joining us now this morning to discuss the legacy he leaves behind is political correspondent with the Irish Examiner, Aoife Moore. Good morning to you, Aoife. Thank you for joining us this morning. Aoife, can you put in words just how critical, we're saying it all morning, we're seeing it in the papers, that David was in securing that Good Friday Agreement?
Absolutely. You know, we heard even from Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister, in the last 24 hours saying that there would not have been a Good Friday Agreement without David Trimble. And I think the most interesting thing about David Trimble is the journey he went on. You know, he began politics as a real hardliner. You know, he was there manning those barricades during the Drumcree standoff with the Orange Order. There are photos of David Trimble arm in arm with Ian Paisley at the height of that. So it shows you really, you know, the journey he did go on, you know, his ability to compromise, to sit round a table with Sinn Féin. And ultimately, he paid the price for it in his political career. Unionism and the unionist voters did not appreciate it at the time, the lengths he was willing to go to for peace. I think he's been vindicated now, and we're seeing that from the outpouring of tributes since. But it is incredibly interesting, you know, that he did go from this hardliner. You know, he went into politics because he was against the Sunningdale Agreement. And ironically, the Sunningdale Agreement is now seen as, you know, the basis or the blueprint for the Good Friday Agreement. So he entered politics because he was against Sunningdale and ended up being an architect of the Good Friday Agreement.
And that, I think, like, you've referenced some of these iconic pictures that we saw, you know, during the height of the Troubles and the aftermath, and one of them is him and Ian Paisley walking down the Garavaghey Road in the nationalist area because, you know, they were against the Sunningdale Agreement. But you mentioned, and he looms large in all of our heads because he's so integral to the Good Friday Agreement and what has happened in the North. But as he lost his seat in Upper Bann after the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, he knew that what he was doing was going to have a persona non grata in the unionist community.
Well, it just shows you as well, you know, the SDLP were on a slow descent from Good Friday as well. You know, the UUP and the SDLP were the two largest parties at the time, and they both heavily paid the price for compromises in the aftermath. You know, the unionist vote for the Good Friday Agreement was only 51%. So he knew that this leadership would take a toll on his own popularity, and it didn't seem to bother him that much. You know, he never gave up on politics. He joined the Conservative Party very shortly after he lost his seat. You know, he joined the House of Lords. He's been a public servant almost his entire life. But he was very well aware of the kind of price he was going to pay for it. You know, if you read Jonathan Powell, he was Tony Blair's advisor at the time on Northern Ireland. If you read his book, David Trimble just lurched from one chaos to another, and it was within his own party. It was very rarely arguments with Republicans or Bertie Ahern. It was within his own party that he withstood a number of leadership challenges, but it was not easy for him, and it was his own community and what would have been his own voters that caused him the most difficulty in the end.
And we see the pictures of him there with John Hume, and of course they won the Nobel Peace Prize, and that was very significant.
Oh, massive at the time. You know, the notion that these, you know, people, two men from alternate communities had worked for this, you know, life-changing agreement. And I think it is a testament to David Trimble. You know, the nationalist community were a bit different in that sense that, you know, John Hume remained incredibly popular, whereas David Trimble kind of went in and out of favour. But the people who were there at the time, you know, the Bertie Aherns of the world, the Tony Blairs, the Micheál Martins, they credit David Trimble. I mean, Bertie Ahern talks about the rows he used to have with David Trimble constantly, and he said he was a great negotiator and he was, you know, he stood his ground all the time, but apparently a really affable person as well outside of politics. And I think him and Bertie Ahern went on to become good friends, as did him and John Hume. But at the time, I would imagine there wasn't much time for jokes during the Good Friday Agreement.
Bertie has said that he was as tough as teeth, and we're going to be speaking to Bertie Ahern about David Trimble a little bit later on, because that's one thing that I found, you know, an insight into a man who was, you know, he came to politics from academia. You know, he was a law lecturer in Queen's University. But you know, we see, you know, members of the UUP and David Trimble is, you know, it's very staunch and hard line. But by all accounts, you know, he loved Elvis, and he was quite a witty man, you know, sides of him that we just wouldn't see.
Yeah, there's bits and pieces I've even found from doing my own research about, the first time Jerry Adams approached him, he tried to make some kind of joke and he said that David Trimble just looked him up and down and said, "Grow up, Jerry," and left the room. He also used to comment that he said he worried about his image only in the way that he looked angry a lot of the time and angrier than he actually was. And he used to get quite paranoid about his red face because he used to think that it made him look more angry than, than he actually was. And he was always at pains to can tell people that he was actually in an all right mood. It's just the way his face was.
Wow.
So he had a resting face before anyone had a resting face,
Yes.
essentially.
Yeah.
He wasn't
Very
that
worried
angry.
about his complexion.
It's lovely to, hear that side of the man
to hear
as
that
well.
side of him. But Aoife, going back to politics, and recently he did come out against the Northern Ireland Protocol and was quite vocal on it also.
Yeah, I mean, you need to remember where David Trimble came from. He was a hardliner. He was an orange man. Like, this is definitely, his community feels betrayed by the Northern Ireland Protocol. So I wasn't ultimately surprised. You can be for the peace process and against the protocol, and he is an Ulster Unionist at the end of the day. Doug Beattie, the current leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, is also against the protocol, but not with the same kind of ferociousness and lack of willingness to compromise as maybe the DUP are.
Yeah.
So he said he felt that the Northern Ireland Protocol betrayed the Good Friday Agreement and he felt very let down by it. He wrote a really interesting essay for the newsletter that I read this morning, not that long ago, about the Northern Ireland Protocol and how he felt it undermined the Good Friday Agreement. Now, the argument from the other side of politics is that it actually protects the Good Friday Agreement, but it just shows he was this great compromising man, but at the end of the day, he was very staunch in his place and he was an Ulster Unionist, and Ulster Unionist people are against the Northern Ireland Protocol.
There'll be a lot said about him, and there has been a lot said about him around the world this morning, and certainly we'll see what will be happening up in the north in relation to his commemorations. Aoife Moore from the Irish Examiner, thank you so much for talking to us this morning. Cheers, Aoife.